It's through the renewing of my mind. He's transformed my mind. And one of these issues has been abortion. Back in the day, Roe was amazing. Like I would have said that Roe didn't go far enough. I would have argued for infanticide. It gets back to what we're talking about. Where's the standard?
This is one of the most controversial and hot topics in our country right now. Abortion. I hope no matter where you stand on this issue, you will watch this video all the way through. I interviewed Jon Noyes today about this topic. If you don't know who Jon is, he is a former atheist, and he was a very liberal and outspoken atheist, especially about topics like this. In fact, he wouldn't say that he was pro-choice. He would have said, when he was an atheist, that he was pro-abortion. He had pretty radical views about abortion, and now as a Christian, he has a completely different set of views and a set of values about this topic. There was a lot more that we could have gotten into. There could have been a part 2, even a part 3 of the questions that I wanted to ask him and get into. But this is a complicated topic for many people. I hope that there are actually people watching that are pro-choice. I think Jon has a very loving and logical way of laying out these arguments about the logic that a lot of pro-life people have and why they have it. I might have Jon back on later in the future, perhaps to even talk more about this topic. So let me know in the comments section if maybe there's a topic that we didn't cover in this video that you would like to see covered. I really enjoyed learning from Jon, and I hope that you do as well. Hi, everyone. I am really excited to have somebody on my channel that I highly respect. You guys have heard me talk about Stand to Reason throughout the existence of my channel. It's a ministry that I highly respect. I listen to it very often, almost daily. Today, I have someone from STR, someone I highly respect, Jon Noyes. And
Hey.
if you've listened to STR, then you know who he is. Jon, thank you so much for coming on my channel today to talk about this very tough topic.
No, it's my pleasure, Melissa. Thank you. And great work. I mean, seriously,
Thank you.
I have gleaned so much from your podcasts and from your your YouTube stuff is normally what I watch, and your story is incredible. And I'm so grateful that you're allowing yourself to be used in the way that you are. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, ditto. It's cool when we all come together, and the people don't know this, but when you got on, when you told me you knew me, I was like, oh my goodness, Jon Noyes watches my channel. And it's really cool when that happens, because we don't know that we get filled by each other. And I like that, because then it comes out in our ministry and how we serve others.
Absolutely. Well, we're all part of the same team,
Exactly.
And we all have the same ultimate goals in mind, and we're all kind of serving the same master and the same Lord to the same ends.
Yeah, and this is something that, listening to STR, this is a topic you guys talk about a lot. It's abortion. And for people listening, we kind of preach to the choir sometimes with these kinds of tough topics. I had my friend Jen on, I believe last year, to talk about, she's a former lesbian, and I interviewed her, and I thought we'd get just so much hate, and we did, but not as much as I thought. And I kind of want this to be a video that's for the person that believes that we're wrong, as odd as that sounds. I want a pro-choicer to listen to this video and hear that we have compassion for them, we don't hate them. I want somebody, even if you've had an abortion, watch this video. We're not going to bash on you. I want to talk about the tough stuff, though. I love this stuff. I love it whenever people can have a conversation about these tough topics. And you guys do not shy away from anything, from homosexuality to abortion, having a biblical worldview, a Christian worldview that talks about these tough things. And that's what we're having you on today to talk about. Just to get started, I'm sure all these questions are questions that you have thought about, have answered, have talked about. I have a lot for Jon, guys, to cover, so we'll see what we get to. But I'm going to talk about what I would consider the objections, the top objections, if you will, to abortion. There's a lot of them, but we'll see how many we get to. Number one, first and foremost, I hear this a lot about the biggest argument, and it really comes down to the core. It's the core, in my opinion, of the butting heads over abortion. The controversy is that, what is this? What is the essence of abortion comes down to, is this a human being? Is it an innocent human life, or is this just a clump of cells? If it's a human, it's wrong. So how would you handle someone insisting that this is just a clump of cells, especially in the first trimester?
Yeah. So first, I want to start by saying that this is a hard topic.
Yeah.
This is a topic that I feel like, in all honesty, sometimes we Christian apologists, we drop the ball in our tone, not the information, not the arguments, but in our tone. So I want to make sure that if anybody's watching this right now and you've had an abortion, I want you to know that there's forgiveness in Jesus. There is now no condemnation in Jesus Christ, is what the Bible tells us. None. There's nothing that can separate you from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord, is
Amen.
what Paul says. And if we run to the cross of Christ with the most grievous sin, we're forgiven. So I just want you to know that. And I say that because a few years back, I pastored a large church here in my neck of the woods. And I started this abortion recovery ministry at the church, where I just, statistically speaking, I knew that sitting in a body, we had maybe 1,000 people on Sunday morning. Statistically speaking, I had upwards of 100, maybe more, women who had abortions. And the church is the place where we don't talk about it, where the church is the place that we should be talking about it. So I wanted to bring it to the forefront. And I said, if you've had an abortion, the same thing I just said, there's forgiveness. I would love it if you would join this support group. Well, we got dozens of women. We had one person on staff. I hesitate to use her name because I'm not sure if she'd appreciate that, but she publicly came and presented on the stage. But she was on staff at the church. She had three abortions more than 30 years ago, and then was never able to have children after that. She never told anybody.
Wow.
Never. And that weight, and I got to see what happens. And that's just one of many stories I've seen. So if you're watching this and you've had an abortion, I want you to know that that there's help. You need to find somebody to talk to, and there's forgiveness.
Yeah.
And there's forgiveness within the halls of the church. And we need to be more accepting of these people. We need to let the light of the gospel shine on these hard issues into the darkest corners of our church in order to see progress. And I think we're getting there. I really do. I think we're getting there. So I just wanted to lead off with that. I hope that's okay.
I'm glad you did. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that wisdom in starting off with that.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that, because, okay, so let's get to the main issue, right? You brought it up. There are a ton of ways or reasons that people justify having an abortion. I was in my hometown of Plymouth, Massachusetts last October with my whole family. So I have 4 daughters, 12, 10, 9, and 5. You can pray for me. My house is always going off. There's somebody always crying. It's usually me in the corner in the fetal position trying to figure out what is going on. And so I took my kids back east to my hometown, and we're walking around Plymouth, Massachusetts, and it was a beautiful day, absolutely gorgeous October day. And we were walking around one of the open spaces there, and I look off to the side, and I see a commotion and a woman screaming. I mean, hysterical, running down a side street. This side street slopes down into a main road, Water Street, which is right on the water in Plymouth. And she's chasing a stroller. And behind her are like 5 other people running really fast, chasing this stroller. Finally, some gentleman jumps out. He stops the stroller before it gets to the thing, the main road, and everybody sigh of relief. This is a true story.
Oh my goodness.
Sigh of relief. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And the woman opens the stroller lid. She takes out, it's a dog in her stroller, right? So that's a problem in and of itself, but we're not talking about that. Yeah. What I realized, though, is all of a sudden she was like running down, and behind her were a group of hundreds of people blocking the street. And it was all part of a pro-choice rally, a pro-abortion rally. So as she turns, I had my family with me. I had my youngest daughter on my shoulders. I started bringing out the point. I just said, hey, guys, I'm not trying to rain on your parade here. I'm not trying to do anything. I just want to, as Greg Kokel says, I just want to put a stone in your shoe. Maybe I can get you to maybe think differently about this issue, because you guys were just chasing a stroller with a dog in it, realizing that life is precious.
Yeah.
But now you're protesting you're advocating for the taking of an innocent human life, not in a stroller, but in the safest place that it should be, in the mother's womb. Can you explain that to me? And so I got to talking to all of these people, and I heard everything, right? It's just a clump of cells. That's what you brought up. So many times people say that, in the same way that you and I are just a clump of cells, if you want to go that direction.
Yeah.
But anything is a clump of cells. So what do you mean by just a clump of cells? When they say that, when somebody comes up to me and say, oh, it's just a clump of cells, who cares? First, I'm going to ask them, well, what do you mean by just a clump of cells? And what do you mean by that? So it's just a clump of cells, therefore it's not valuable, is what they mean. Therefore it's not living, is maybe what they mean. Therefore it's not a human being, is maybe what they mean. That's usually what they mean by that, is it's less valuable than you or I, maybe, right? Because it's just a clump of cells. But then what I'll do is I'll talk to the person, and I'll ask them, okay, so it's just a clump of cells, but does it matter what type of clump of cells? Does it matter? Would it matter if I could show you or talk to you and tell you that science, I'm not talking about the Bible right now, science says that clump of cells is actually a unique living human being? Would that matter to you? Why or why not? So that's how I'm going to engage that argument. I'm going to try to ask questions and get involved with them, instead of just ramming stuff down their throat. Because ultimately, and here's the deal with when people raise this objection, and like a dozen others, it's just there's tons of reasons people use to justify abortion, right? Abortion's a decision between a woman and her doctor. Making abortion illegal will force women into back alleys and make it less safe. Or who are we to judge, right? All of these things. Women shouldn't be forced into dangerous situations or whatnot. But the fundamental question is what is it?
Yes.
What is it? What is that clump of cells? Because if it's a clump of cells in the same way that I used to have a birthmark on the back of my neck, I got it removed. If it's the same way, if it's a clump of cells in the same way that birthmark or a wart or something undesirable or something you just don't like, by all means, to take it away, take it off. But if that clump of cells is in fact a unique human being, I think the discussion needs to go further. And I think actually it's wrong in almost every single case. It's wrong to take that life. So it ultimately comes down to, what is the unborn? What is that clump of cells? The way that I usually try to illustrate in the conversation is I was hiking with my kids. I've got a lot of great hiking here in Southern California. And like I said, all girls. So they freak out at the sign of bugs. They freak out at the sign of snakes. They freak out at the sign of deer, anything. So I'm walking with my kids hiking, and I hear my 10-year-old, she's now 10, at the time she was younger, screaming. I mean, like screaming, "Daddy, daddy, 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 can I kill it? Can I kill it? Kill it, kill it, kill it. Just kill it." And I'm looking and I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's a good example for this, because what was the first question I asked? What is it that you want to kill?
Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes she says that about her little sister. And so sometimes Annette, my youngest, climbs all over my other kids and they just want to kill her. But can I kill her? No, I can't, because I see that she has value. But if it's a spider, that sucker's dead. You know what I mean? If it's a snake, it's probably not dead, but I'm going to go make sure it's not a rattlesnake and protect my kids. So what it is matters. And in this instance, it matters more than I can probably emphasize. So the fundamental question is what is the unborn, right? And science, the science of embryology, has clearly taught us that the unborn are unique, living human beings. And that's really important. And it's never okay to take the life of an innocent human being. That's murder.
This is the fundamental question, isn't it? Like, that's why I'm starting with it, is because like I remember seeing somebody post, I can't remember exactly I understood what they thought about a fetus, though, is that they there was a bowl and it was like cake mix, right? So they had the cake flour, the ingredients, but they just weren't mixed together.
Yeah.
And it's like a potential to be a cake or something. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a really good example of how they viewed the fetus, like
Yeah.
inside of a womb. I'm like, oh, this isn't alive. It's like they don't see it as something that has intrinsic value as a human being. It's not a human being yet, which is the next thing, which is, when does it become a human being?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. And I kind of want to segue into late term abortions from this point. So I'm in New Mexico. It's a very progressive state.
Yeah.
And I have a family member who has always been pro-choice. And they were absolutely shocked that abortion after 20 weeks was legal. And they're like, no, it's not. Yeah, it is. No, that is inhumane. That is wrong. That is this, that is that. I'm like, no, it's true. And especially after Roe versus Wade being overturned, which I will ask you about in a second, that has been shown to be like a haven, right? New Mexico has these abortion clinics open up until the 3rd trimester abortions. It's unreal. I looked it up. You can make an appointment. It blew my mind. Now, I want to ask you about that. People that don't think that this is real, how would you respond to them? What would you say to them for people that don't believe that late-term abortions are allowed?
Well, it's just demonstrably false.
Yeah, it is.
I would point them to, like you said, a local abortion clinic, whether it be a Planned Parenthood or one of the other abortion clinics that's offered in New Mexico, California, or any other state, and say, here's the evidence. This is just demonstrably false, and it's really sad. Like, it should really break our hearts. This issue is so hard for me because these babies are made in the image of God, and they're special and they're unique, and their life has purpose and meaning, just like anybody else's. So if I'm talking to somebody and they're just saying things that are just blatantly false, like, no, you can't have a late-term abortion, I'm going to say, well, I think you can. It's not just a matter of my personal opinion. I think I can prove it to you. If I show you that late-term abortions are legal in our state, if I point you to Planned Parenthood and you learn that, will you change your position? Because I'd like to see if maybe they would rethink not just their position on late-term abortion, but their position on abortion in general.
Yeah.
What's interesting, this is really interesting, Melissa. The person, your friend, this used to be me, by the way. I like you. I didn't grow up Christian. I wasn't like, well, I guess you got saved pretty early and then kind of wandered.
Yeah.
I was an atheist for forever until I got saved. And I was not just pro-choice, but I would have said I was pro-abortion. I would say, I don't care if it's a human being or not, kill it. Like, who cares? Because I was trying to chase my worldview. I was trying to go to wherever it led me. We're not special at all. But the person who brings up the idea, the pro-choice person who objects to late-term abortions, isn't like me. They see that there's meaning and value in human life, but they just assign that human in value at a certain point that's later than when you and I would. So my question, ultimately, I'm trying to get them to change their position, not just on late-term abortion, whether or not they think it's legal. It is legal. Like, that's just a fact. It's demonstrably like, we can show it. So I'm trying to have them change the position on abortion in general. So I'm going to say something. Well, it is legal. I'm just letting say his name's Ron. Ron, it is legal. You can go to Planned Parenthood right now on their website, and you can see the parameters of when they will not perform an abortion, and late-term abortions are legal right now in New Mexico. But my question is, I just want to take it a step further, Ron. Why do you think late-term abortions are immoral? Why do you think we should stop women from having late-term abortions if it's just a clump of cells? At what point do you assign value to that unborn baby? So you see what's happened? I'm trying to have a conversation with him because they're choosing as far as I'm concerned, it's an arbitrary point in time where they're deciding that this human being is valuable. To people, not just in late-term abortion discussion, but people with abortions anyway. That day on the street with my kids, I debated people on this and talked to them and debated them in a good way, right? I argued with them in a good way. Good conversations. I literally said that somebody would say, you know, it's not a human being, or whatever, that doesn't have value. I'd say, well, you know, I'm trying to funnel all the conversations down to that one question that we already made clear. What is the unborn?
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to say, you know, okay, so you think that woman should be able to have abortion because whatever reason she gives, because it's standing in her way of her educational goals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I want to go get a second master's degree. And right now, to be honest with you, my 5-year-old, she's standing in the way. You have no idea how difficult she is. So I'm going to go kill her. Is that okay? Well, no, you can't take the life of a 5-year-old. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, you can't take the life of a 6-month-old, whatever age you choose. This is called trotting out the toddler.
Mm-hmm.
So you just bring the age down. And now this person has recognized that at a certain point pre-born, there's value.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have to go past that and ask them, why is there value at that stage and not a week before,
Mm-hmm.
not a month before? What exactly is it that you're appealing to that assigns value to this innocent human being?
Yeah.
And that's on them to discuss with us, right? Because they're making the claim. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. Yeah. And do you know if late-term abortions are for any reason, or is there just some sort of limitation to?
Yeah. So, and I haven't checked in a while, so I could be wrong on this.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there is, they're going to ask why.
Yeah.
There has to be a medical reason, but the way that it's written, the way that the law is written is so ambiguous. It could be depression. It could be financial. It could be so you could go to the abortionist, you could go to the doctor and say, I need to have a late-term abortion. And then when they ask for your justification, you could say, because I'm becoming I'm overwhelmingly anxious at the thought of having another child or having a child. Okay. So yes, you can have, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware,
I think you're correct, because the clinic
that's what it used to be, at least.
Mm-hmm. What caught my eye with this clinic was, you know how the algorithm sometimes just shows me interesting things, and I'm actually glad for that. The news and local news and things like that. And it was a local abortion clinic that was prepping for the massive amounts of people that were going to be coming to New Mexico for abortions after Roe versus Wade. And it was late-term abortion. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I read the whole thing, and it was, you're correct. In other words, that from what I saw and read from this clinic is that it could be for a reason, that if you're struggling mentally, emotionally, things like that. And it was so sad to know and read that this was happening in my own city, to the point where it was disturbing even the pro-choicers.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of springboards me into my next question with that, which is Roe versus Wade. This is huge. This was overturned recently, as we all know. Big, huge, enormous controversy in our country right now. And I'm watching it, right? I'm watching this. I'm reading stuff. I'm that's what we do, right? As apologists, John, we lurk.
Yeah.
Apologists are great lurkers, because you got to be a good listener. You got to take in the information and try to assess it, and then give, something to say about it. And one thing I noticed in the argument was, here we are talking about the point of abortion, that what is it? Here, the point with that is, was it constitutional?
Yeah.
So wondering if you could break that down. How did that even be? How was it? I know it's a long answer, that I'm forcing you to be concise with right now, but whenever it was made into law, it was, it's constitutional. Now suddenly it's not. And how does that work? Can you break that out for us?
Yeah. So what Roe did is it guaranteed a constitutional right, meaning this right was protected under the Constitution of the United States. And when I say this right, we're referring to a woman to obtain an abortion for any reason, is what the decision was. For the longest time, the Roe had been perceived, even by legal experts, as bad law. An overreach of the federal government. It's not explicitly stated in the U.S. Constitution. And if we think about, from my perspective, and that's where I'm going to speak from, the idea that it's constitutional to take the life of an innocent human being is clearly not a good decision by the court, right? And so the decision in general, Roe itself, was considered to be fairly bad law. It just wasn't a good decision in and of itself. Now, I think where the interesting part of this conversation lies is what Dobbs has done, right? So Dobbs is the recent decision that kind of struck down Roe v. Wade, and what it's done is, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's really important to understand
why I'm asking. Yeah,
it hasn't made abortion illegal.
Yeah,
it hasn't really affected Dobbs as of right now. Hasn't affected a ton. Right. What it's done is it's gone. The Dobbs has said, you know what, this isn't a federal issue. This is a state issue. So each individual state is able to decide for itself what your abortion laws are going to be, if any. And I think I think it's a move in the right direction. I think that it's a good thing. Now, this is something to point out here. So the people who are freaking out, right? There's a lot of people. My family is very, very liberal, very, very progressive. And they're legitimately scared. Like legitimately. I have friends and cousins and family who legitimately think that the government is seeking, now because of this decision, the government is taking away, trampling on women's rights. They're taking away abortion. They're taking away contraception. They tie all this stuff together. And in reality, none of that has happened.
Yeah.
All the court has said is this issue goes back to the states. It's not up to the federal government to make these laws. So the states must decide, which means, technically speaking, if our system of government is working the way that it is, it's up to you and I to decide, which means, and this is I guess this is what I think is the most important part of this whole thing. Our work as Christian apologists, our work as Christians, our work as people who defend life has just begun. Right. I think some of us, I know me personally, this issue is hard. Like we've said it so many times already. Yeah. It's tiring. It's a difficult issue. But we can't allow ourselves to get complacent or soft or back off of it now because of Dobbs. We need to be pressing even harder. We need to be educating the people in our sphere of influence even more now, because in the next round of elections, this issue, because of Dobbs, because of Roe's overturning, in the next round of elections, I truly believe for the first time, the abortion issue is going to be the only issue, the only issue that we're going to be debating. And so you're going to see it on the stage. I mean, it's always been front and center, kind of. It's been one of the top 3 or 4 issues, but, you know, it's been mixed in there with the economy. It's been mixed in there with immigration. It's been in there. And those two actually were supposed to, until Dobbs, be, I think, the leading issues. And then they kind of, those would obscure abortion, which I think is a more severe, more important issue. Now, I think this big issue is going to be on the forefront of the cultural conversation. It's going to be in the forefront of the elections, which means our job to educate, to get our view, our pro-life apologetic out there is so much more important because of Dobbs. So we need to be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks for the hope that we have, right? And on this issue in particular, my dream is that during this, I used to be highly political. Like I lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time. I loved going out. I'd go out with my friends at night to watch the debates, and we'd have debate parties. And it was like, I used to love it. Now it's different for me. I'm a Christian now, so so it makes things different. But, you know, I would love it. One of the things that's always driven me crazy about presidential debates is I feel like it's just a show now. You know, it's a system of one-upmanship. They're trying to say who's going to say the most extreme thing. And none of what they say, I feel like, is really a promise. None of it is really going to happen or anything. I would love it if this round of debates, if whoever it is that gets up there to go against whoever the anti-abortion goes against the pro-abortion, or however we want to phrase it, pro-choice versus the pro-life. I would love it if the pro-life representative is thoroughly trained in pro-life Christian apologetics. So then they can ask the person on the stage, when they start talking about abortion, they can narrow it down to the issue that we just did. Right? I understand this. I totally agree with you. I think it's a woman's right to choose. I think nobody should force a woman to choose anything, especially in a difficult situation. But what is the unborn? Can we just talk about that? Can we talk about what the unborn are? And I would love to see that kind of get pressed in there instead of just one-upmanship and have a Christian. So anyways, I kind of answered your question, kind of danced around it a little bit, but Dobbs ultimately, so Roe was bad law. To begin with, it's widely considered that way. If you read the legal analysis of it, my background is legal. I worked at law firms before I was a Christian apologist.
Yeah, guys, just so you know, Jon has a really fascinating background. I'm gonna leave a link to your story in the description. The Jon that you see here is not the Jon from long ago. This is good Jon. Then you have dark Jon. Two polarizing people. Very interesting story. So yeah. I had to pop that in there because it's just interesting where you're at now from where you were. So, but I apologize. Continue.
It's been a crazy journey, man. God is so good. I worked at the law firm I worked at in DC was Jenner and Block, and we worked on a lot of appellate work. And actually, I filed the Supreme Court brief in the Terry Schiavo case, and that was the original right to life case. We represented her husband. This woman, she was on life support, feeding tube, and all this, and her husband was arguing to take her off life support. Her family wanted her on life support. And I'm the one who filed that Supreme Court brief. And it's interesting because back then I thought I was fighting for the right side, and now I've switched. A lot of my old bosses went with Barack Obama to the White House to work as his legal counsel. My first boss was Donald Verrilli, who argued Obergefell and won. The groundbreaking, redefining marriage case, right? For gay marriage. And so it's really interesting to see how God has used, and I wasn't like instrumental in these cases. I'm just saying, like, I was a paralegal and I did what I was told. But I had a good time doing it. And I met some really great people, but it's interesting how God has totally, right? It's through the renewing of my mind. He's transformed my mind. And one of these issues has been abortion, where back in the day, Roe was amazing. Like I would have said that Roe didn't go far enough. We should, no questions asked. You should just be able to do whatever you want with your body. Hey, you want to kill that baby? No problem. I would have argued for infanticide.
Wow.
I would have said until this is where it gets back to what we're talking about. Where's the standard?
Yeah.
I would have said until you're somewhat self-sustaining, as long as you're relying on another human being for your life, I think that you should be able to take that life. That's what I would have said.
Wow.
That's what Peter Singer, he's very close to that. And he's one of the leading ethicists in the world today writing.
Yeah, at least that's awful, but I have to respect the consistency with the worldview. It's always easier whenever you can talk with someone who's being consistent with what they believe, like an atheistic worldview.
Yeah.
Where you're having to have as a consequence these beliefs if you're going to be consistent with them. That's not rare anymore, it seems, where infanticide is something that we're actually talking about. Like, what is an infant? What is a baby? Why are we having that conversation? Like, when does it become a baby? Well, when it's born. Okay, well then what if it survived an abortion? Like, you have all these other debates about, okay, well, what brings value to life? And it's really interesting that we even have to have these conversations.
Yeah. And at the base of all of those conversations about what brings value to life, it's interesting because you said, okay, well, some people say, well, once the baby is born. Okay. So that something, I'm going to use the word because anyways, magical happens, right? Magical happens down the birth canal. Something magical happens, and all of a sudden that baby is valuable. And you mentioned before we got on the air, you mentioned that the gentleman from Babylon Bee, and he was on Joe Rogan's show. What was his name?
Seth Dillon is the CEO of Babylon Bee, and Joe Rogan. Jon doesn't know these people, guys.
Well, I do now. I'm so sorry. Both of those guys, if they ever watch this, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm not good.
You look like a cousin, like a distant cousin of Joe Rogan, and you would really.
I'm trying to. Like, I have very little exposure to him now, just so you know, and like I'm drawn to him though, not just because he's a beautiful man, but because he's just
he talks about these things.
Yeah, his conversation style and stuff. I like the fact that he's direct.
Yes.
he says what he
Yeah.
thinks, which not in like a machismo weird way, but I just think I think he's I actually don't know where he stands. I don't know if he's liberal or conservative. It seems like he's kind of middle of the road.
I think he's a closet pro-lifer.
Yeah, interesting. Well, he kind of seems like it, but he brought up that word magical. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is something that's thrown at the Christian all the time. Like we're the ones that believe in magic, right? Because we believe in God, your sky daddy or whatever. This something magical happens. And he was saying like, oh, well, something magical happens at the moment of conception. And then I thought the Babylon Bee gentleman, I thought he did fantastic. His response was, whoa, hold on. He slowed it down a little bit and was like, I guess we all have that magical moment when we arbitrarily assign value to life. But mine's earlier. And what's interesting is I would have taken a step further, and maybe I might have missed it if he didn't take it a step further, but I'd want to press in what is it that assigns value? Because the way that the pro-abortion establishment, the way that the pro-choice establishment says it, they're always going to say something like, wherever it is, like if the baby is outside of the womb, if the baby is self-aware, if the baby can feel pain, if the baby can sustain itself, right? That's what I used to say. But none of those, thank God, are what assign value. If you think about it, right? So this is Scott Klusendorf. He taught me this, and well, Greg Kokel taught me this, but through Scott Klusendorf, his book. I'm sure you've read it. Have you read Case for Life by Klusendorf?
No.
Oh my goodness, Melissa, you've got to order it and buy it and read it.
Yay, another book on my bookshelf. I'm down. I'm here.
And it's actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, it's a lot like your YouTube and podcast. It's hitting up difficult topics, but in a way that's understandable, that where we can chew it up and really digest it.
Nice.
And Scott does that with this really difficult issue of abortion, A Case for Life. He breaks this down. What he does is he talks about the SLED acronym, you know, in the context of what do we assign value. Most arguments that are for abortion seek to assign value to life according to one of four things: size, S; level of development, L; environment, E; or degree of dependency, D. Size, level of development, environment, or degree of dependency. But when we think about this, it shows how, honestly, I'm not saying this like to be mean to anybody who feels this way, but like, it's just absurd. Size. I'm a big dude. I'm like 230 pounds, like getting smaller, hopefully, but 230 pounds. But because I'm big, does that make me more valuable than my wife who's teeny? Well, of course not. You know, so then why do we say because something is so small, because this human life is so small, why do we say it's not as valuable? Or level of development. Would you say that I am more valuable than my 10-year-old daughter, Phoebe?
Not at all.
Like, and therefore, and not only that, therefore I can take Phoebe's life? Well, no, of course not. Because level of development, I'm way more developed than my 10-year-old daughter. Trust me, I am. But that doesn't mean I can take her life, because level of development it doesn't assign us value. You know, environment, where we are, birth canal, right? You're in the mother's womb. Okay, so therefore you're not valuable. But then all of a sudden you go through the birth canal and you're out in the open air. Well, if I tomorrow morning or Sunday morning, I'm flying to Colorado to teach at Summit. When I'm in Colorado, am I any more or less valuable than I am when I'm in California? I mean, and therefore you can take my life? No, because where I go in and out of homes or offices and states or space, it doesn't assign value to you. Degree of dependency. I have a friend who just 5-6 months ago gave birth to her baby at 28 weeks.
Oh, preemie.
Just barely a pound.
Wow.
And what's interesting is my friend is pro-choice, and I haven't vehemently pro-choice, atheist, pro-choice, naturalist. And I haven't broached the conversation because she and her husband are still kind of in the throes of everything, because he's not out of the hospital yet and still on a ventilator. But what's interesting is that she's done whatever she can to sustain that life. Yet a year ago, she would have argued that any woman can choose for any reason to end that life at that same gestational age. And now all of a sudden there's value because, well, she sees that baby and she interacts with that baby and she sees that baby is valuable, but that baby is completely dependent on other people and machines. So is it okay for me to go to that hospital and kill that baby? Is it okay for, not me, is it okay for my friend to go and kill that baby? Well, because the baby, or I have I serve on the board of directors of this man. His name is Nick Vujicic. He's got no arms and legs, life without limbs.
Yeah.
This guy, I mean, this guy he is like the spokesperson. He should be the poster boy for the pro-choice movement because he's got no arms and legs. He's smaller than just about everybody. He's completely dependent. He has to go everywhere with a caretaker. He can't feed himself. He can't go to the bathroom by himself. Without the use of a chair, he can't go long distances. And he travels all over the place. So his location's always changing. I mean, it's not his size. It's not his level of development because his arms didn't develop. His legs didn't develop. He was born that way. It's not a degree of dependency. He's completely dependent, but he's just as worthy of life as I am. It's just as much as a human being as I am. And these are the things that we need to recognize. And these are things that we should be talking about with our pro-choice friends. You know, it's not the size, level of development, environment, or degree of dependency that assigns value. No, we're valuable because we are a certain kind of thing. We're human beings, and that value is it's not extrinsic. It's not extrinsic. It's not something that we assign. It's not something that we possess, because if it's something that we can gain by self-possession, it's something that we can lose. But something that's intrinsic, it's something that's given to us. It's something that's assigned at us at the moment of conception, and that's the image of God.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, this is the true story of reality. This is how the world really is. I'm not saying that this is my this is now we're starting to get into your thing, right? The new age stuff and postmodernism and your truth. You do you, boo. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is true of all people, by the way, which means that it should affect how we discuss this topic with people too, because the people that we're talking to are made in the image of God. The women who are struggling with this extremely difficult issue, they're made in the image of God, and they have feelings, and they are in a hard issue. But it's not these extrinsic circumstances. It's not these things. We don't assign value to ourselves or to other people, but it's assigned to us, and it's immutable. When I was just a pastor, I would go and spend time every Friday morning at my local abortion mill and stand the line, because I thought, if I'm going to be teaching on this, if I'm going to be speaking about this, I should actually put the money, put my money where my mouth is. I should put my time where my mouth is, and I should go be boots on the ground and actually do this. So there's a place in Glendale, right by where I live, about 40 minutes away, and every Friday is abortion day. That's all they do in the clinic on Fridays is abortions. That's it.
Wow.
So every single person that's walking in there, is going in for abortion. They're not handing out contraception. They're not doing ultrasounds. They're not doing mammograms, nothing. It's just abortions. And one of the things I used to do when I was out there is I'd speak to these people like they're human beings made in the image of God. And I think that they appreciate that. I didn't yell and scream at them profanities. You murderer.
Yeah.
I didn't say that to them.
Yeah.
I said, please don't kill your baby. Please don't do that. And one of the things I think the Christian community that we oftentimes miss too is we have a great message, and it's a true message, but are we standing in the gap? What I mean by that is when I stand the line, I'd say, I have a lawyer for you that's a fantastic family lawyer. She will handle adoption free of charge for you. She's phenomenal.
Wow.
I have a family that's ready to adopt your baby right now. By the way, there is not a lack of families in this country looking to adopt newborn babies. There's just not. My wife and I have an agreement between us. When I go and do that work in front of these Planned Parenthoods or these abortion mills, I will adopt that baby. My wife and I will adopt your baby. I have a family who has a guest house, and they've agreed for a year and a half. They'll put that mom up, her husband, if they want, and their newborn baby.
Wow.
No charge. I have a doctor, a doctor who will take care of you and see you for free. So what I'm trying to do, and why I'm bringing this up, it has nothing to do with like, oh, look at me, I'm so great. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tear down these objections.
Yeah, that there's
that
options.
say to you.
Yeah.
These resources are available.
Yes.
You know, if you need somebody to go to your house and tell your scary dad that you're pregnant because you're afraid, I'll go with you. I'll go with you and we'll do it together, and I'll protect you, you know, or we'll get somebody to come and protect you, you know, and so we need to bring this because it's worth it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was a really big misconception that I had, was what other option do you have? Right. And I think that the suppression of these resources is a big deal that I don't think people know about them. And the other interesting thing about it is that it whenever something is cultural and if something is going with the flow with the culture, it's almost like a sense of tribalism, right? Like you feel like you're going, you're going against your tribe if you are pro-life. And all of a sudden you are siding with people that you don't always agree with, and you don't want to do that. Right. So it's like, oh, that's a Christian, man, they believe this. I really don't want to. That's dirty. That was a element where I felt that it was the easier route to take to be okay with it. But I was also a hypocrite because I believed in animal rights. I was more of an activist. I wasn't an activist, but I would believe in more of protecting innocent animals than I would be of protect. You know what I mean? I did not see, and this is before I had kids. This is important. I did not see humanity as worth saving. I thought we're just, the less people, the better.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
It is very interesting. And so that's very important, because that mindset plays a big role, I think, in the justification for this. Whereas an animal, oh my goodness, they're always going to love me. They're innocent. They're this, they're that. So it seemed like if aborting a mom that had puppies was way more just vulgar to me and terrible and awful than a mom getting an abortion. A human being. It just, the two, now in hindsight, it's very interesting to look back at that and see my perspective and my hypocrisy. We hear all the time, right? The whole morality debate where it's just like, okay, it's not just a Christian thing, right? Like I remember listening to a podcast a while ago. Oh, it was Drew, what is his name? I don't know his YouTube name, but I remember his real name. And he was Drew was picking apart like a lesson that STR was giving. It was like,
I know this well.
Okay,
Cosmic
good.
Skeptic, I think.
Oh, I think you were were you in that? Were you on that podcast?
Yeah, I was interviewing Greg.
That's right. Okay, so then you know exactly. I love it. I don't have to explain.
I forget what I forget what the issue was.
The issue, well, there was a lot of it, but what Greg did was responded to it. And one of the things that Drew said, that even I was like, what? Was that Christians basically made up morality, like by our standard, like we're the ones that put forth morality. And he's like, that is just, thank you for being consistent with your worldview, Drew, but that is just not, like what the way it is. So on that vein, like in that way, there was a famous scientist that once gave a statistic that most people that are against, are pro-life, I should say, against abortion, are religious in some way. So Christian, they believe in God. And I believe that to be true. That is correct. He's like 95% of people that are pro-life are religious. And I'm wondering if you could speak about that. So number one, I do believe there's a lot of closet pro-lifers that aren't even going to admit that. Yeah. But why do you think that is? Why do you think that statistic is the way it is? And do you have to be somebody who's religious? You don't even have to be a Christian, but religious to know that abortion is wrong?
No. First and foremost, arguing that position is a genetic fallacy.
Interesting.
Just because a certain group of people believe X, Y, or Z doesn't make X, Y, or Z true or false.
Good point. That's an excellent point.
So you got to go back to the merits of the argument, the discussion, kind of like what we've been talking about, the value of human life. So it's a genetic fallacy. As far as why those statistics might play out, I would say that it makes total sense because Christians in general have a higher view of humanity than do naturalists.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Plain and simple. We have a higher view of the body. We have a higher view of the unborn. We have a higher view of people. Jesus came to make us more human, not less. Right. So when we're a Christian, number one, it's true. Like I always use this language because it's Greg's language, but I really love it. It's a true story of reality. It accurately reflects the way the world really is.
That's the book that's in the background of almost all my videos.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's back
so
here
good.
too. But
right, God made the world, and he made it a certain way. And one of the features of it is he made human beings in his own image, and because they're made in his own image, they're of infinite value and worth and dignity and respect. That's why murder, rape, theft, and all that is wrong. And apart from that, that standard goes away. Well, the same is true of abortion, right? It's just that the atheist doesn't have a standard to judge right from wrong. So of course, a consistent Christian is going to be anti-abortion because they realize that life is precious from the moment of conception extends into eternity.
Yeah, it's like
a human being is so naturalism doesn't avail itself to that. So naturalism, what I would bring up, I think, to him is I'd say, well, you don't have a standard to, like, there's no standard for you to assign value, not the type of value I'm assigning it to anything. Certainly human beings, like, you can assign value as far as that they can do something, they can perform some certain work or some certain duty, or they're kind of a utilitarian type of value. They're worthy, they're worth something because they perform a task. Kind of leads into like Marxism type deal, but they can't avail themselves to us actually being valuable regardless of anything that we do. So it makes sense that the Christian view would hold a higher standard or place a higher standard on top of human life. I'm thinking out loud here, but I think if you're going to be a consistent naturalist, you have to be pro-abortion, not just pro-choice. Like, you have to be pro-abortion because it's like, whatever. If you're just a naturalist, it is just a clump of cells, but so are we. We're just meat suits in motion, right? We're just a random quantification of molecules bumping into each other. We're accidents. Dawkins says that there's nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. He says there's no right and wrong. Dawkins says there's no justice if naturalism is true, ultimately, because there's no standard of justice.
I also think that there's like a logical problem. I'm glad you're bringing up all this logic, because I don't think you have to be religious to know that something is wrong.
No.
Okay, I mean, slavery. I remember thinking the first time I ever thought, like, oh, maybe I'm wrong about this whole pro-choice thing, was somebody bringing up the intrinsic value of a slave. Well, was that a human? Did they have rights? Did they do this? Do they do that? Was it always wrong? Or was this something that at the time was just accepted in the culture? And now we look back at it and gawk, like, how could we have done that? Yeah. And they brought up that point where it's like, I wonder if 100 years in the future, we're going to look back at this whole abortion debacle and think, how could they have done that? And well, right now, in this time, in this era, there are millions of people that are pro-choice. Why are they? And it has a lot to do with how they see value in the baby. Is it a baby or is it not? It really comes down to that. Is that slave, that person? Is that a person made in the image of God? Or is this somebody that is less than that, Yeah. And I think the similarities are very interesting. And I think that's how it makes justification for why abortion is something that is seen the way it is. That was a good point, bringing up the genetic fallacy, though. I never thought about that.
And it, also on that line of argumentation, all you have to do to prove that person wrong is show that there's one atheist who is pro-life.
Oh, and there's many of them.
And there's many of them. Many of them.
For, what is it? Atheists for against abortion or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But your point on the your point regarding slavery is spot on. And I'd recommend everybody kind of bone up on this issue in this type of context, because the same arguments, when you start studying this stuff, I've done a lot of this last 2 years has been like a biblical justice kick for me. That's been like, I love it. And so I dug in pretty deep into what Southern slavery looked like, what Jim Crow really looked like and stuff. And when you start reading from the mouths of slave owners, the justification for the legalization of slavery and maintaining that system, the words are, I mean, exactly the same. The justifications are exactly the same that we hear for justifying abortion. And it all has to do with assigning value to taking a value away from a certain segment of people, a certain people group, and somehow they're less human and therefore less, or not human at all, and less valuable. Therefore, we can kill them, enslave them, use them, beat them, scourge them, whatever we want.
Yeah. Well, I do have one more question for you. I mean,
Sure.
there's a lot, guys. We could go over, oh my goodness, there could probably be a part 2 to this very easily. But there's only so much time in the day and so much time in a video. So that leaves one more question. So, and this one has a lot to do with, oh my goodness, almost, and we talked about the Joe Rogan podcast. And one of the things he got kind of heated about is, incest, rape. And one thing that Seth Dillon said is abortion is healthcare like rape is lovemaking.
Oh, dude.
Like I paused the video and I kind of listened.
I had never heard that before.
Yeah, it was really, that really put that in perspective. And I wanted to ask you about that. So one of the things that we hear is that, right? No, forget the 99% of abortions that happen. We're going to focus on the 0.1% of incest, rape. And I think Seth had a good point with that whole conversation about his points about it. I kind of want to focus on the 99% that's used for birth control. Like, oh man, I'm pregnant again, gotta go get another abortion. But what would you say? So we have all those, but what would you say to the woman who truly feels like she would not have she has an obligation to not bring a child into the world because of incest or rape, or knows the child will be abused, neglected, or worse? Or what about the woman who needs to have an abortion because of her health? Maybe she's going to die if she doesn't have this abortion. How would you respond to those kinds of things? I know it's a big question again, but
huge.
Try your best. Yeah.
As with all of these,
it's kind of threefold in that sense, but.
So as with all of these issues, you got to move toward with compassion and the understanding. It needs to clearly be stated that rape is disgusting.
Yeah,
it's deplorable. And oftentimes what happens is in this conversation, we fail to discuss what should happen to the man. The rapist here is a criminal and he needs to be brought to justice. And that should, I think, almost overpower our ideas or our conversation about the abortion, right? Because we almost never talk about that.
Yeah. I've noticed that.
And it's also it's so sad that somebody would have that a woman would have to go through. I mean, just so sad. She's a victim. And it should break our hearts, and we should try to get get her whatever help she needs, and sit with her and do it. Jesus, right? Weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn, and move towards those two issues: bringing the man to justice, move towards the woman in compassion and love. But compassion and love also should be extended to that innocent human being growing in that mother's womb. Rape is a heinous crime, and but there's no sense of creating another victim, and that other victim would be the victim of murder if the woman went through with an abortion. It's not it's not the child's fault. The child didn't do anything wrong. It's a consequence. He or she is a consequence of a very, I can't even overstate how unfortunate, how sad and broken that situation is. Like, it's a deplorable situation, and that unborn human being is a product of that, is a byproduct of that. What I would say is if I'm actually talking to a woman and this has happened, and that's actually going through this, taking the life of the baby is never the answer in this instance. You can give birth. I understand that it might be hard I can completely understand that to every day be faced, like having to be faced with raising that child. It might be extremely difficult, but that doesn't give reason enough to abort the baby. For example, I'm going to use the same type of tactic. If a woman is raped and gives birth to a baby and then 5 years later realizes that she can't stand the sight of her kid because he's growing to look like her victimizer, does that mean that she can kill that 5-year-old? No, because the taking of an innocent human life is always wrong. So I'm going to move towards them, and I'm going to say, because this is wrong, like there's adoption services available. There's adoption, like you can put your baby up for adoption and your baby will go to a good home. Like I can guarantee that, we can do a private adoption and take care of that. I can point to research that's been done on the therapeutic benefits of rape victims actually delivering the baby, and whether it be giving up for adoption or raising that child. Research has shown that the opposite thing happens than many people think. The woman oftentimes feels a sense of not justice, but a sense of
healing,
redemption.
Okay.
Almost. What was the word that you just said?
Healing.
Yeah, they feel they like compassion, and they feel like what happens is oftentimes the victim, the woman, feels like something fantastic has come out of one of the most horrible situations that we can possibly imagine. So it's actually the reverse that research sometimes shows us. I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes. There's been a few books written on that. So the victim of rape, just because there's been a crime committed, doesn't make it okay to commit another crime.
Yeah, especially if that's how you see a baby. Like if you're seeing a baby as a baby inside the womb, of course, it makes perfect sense to follow that line of thinking. And again, that's why it comes down to, what is that inside the woman? One thing to pinpoint on this is abortion as healthcare. Can you speak into that? Because I've had situations where, I've even had friends where they will want abortion to be legal in their area or in general because they view it as healthcare. Like if I didn't have an abortion, I'd be dead, kind of thing. What would you say to that?
Yeah. So if I'm involved in a conversation and this is brought up, again, I'm going back to the Columbo tactic. I want to know what that person means by healthcare, because what they mean by healthcare is not what I mean by healthcare. Right. It's that famous line from the Princess Bride. I don't think you know what that word means or whatever he says. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's like the healthcare is not murder. And I'm sorry, but like that's what abortion is. The murder is never healthcare. From one perspective, like so now digging further and not necessarily like going into the conversation now, I'm, instead of just asking a question, I'm assuming that person thinks that it's healthcare for the mom. And it certainly is in one regard. But there's two people here. There's two human beings. And how is that healthcare for the baby? Healthcare is making sure that baby is cared for and healthy, not dead. So there's no complicated answer for this, I don't think. It's just saying that hard fact. And it shouldn't be a hard thing to say, to be honest with you. Like, because this is the way that it is. I mean, healthcare, like you said, that the gentleman from Babylon Bee, he said that abortion is healthcare as just like rape is lovemaking. Yeah. I think that's a perfect parallel. A violation of healthcare. It's like the opposite of it. Yeah. It's the taking of an innocent human life. It doesn't correlate. And so if I'm talking to somebody about that, I want to place, so I don't want to, whenever I'm in a conversation, I don't want to assume more burden than I have to assume. Yeah. So that's why I ask questions. So I'm going to ask the question, well, what do you mean by healthcare? And I'm going to follow up with like, this is total Columbo tactic. How have you come to the conclusion that healthcare is the taking of an innocent human being's life? What if they said, if I don't have an abortion, I'll die? Like my life is in jeopardy. Sure. So now we're getting into this is probably for me, the most difficult situation. And
because it's a
this
moral
is
dilemma. Like,
this is a
either the
moral
mom or
dilemma.
the baby. Yeah, it's a moral
and
dilemma.
and I think that there's room for differing opinions on this now, according to our worldview, honestly. I think that if a doctor, if you're under the care of a good doctor and that doctor comes to you and says you're pregnant, however, there is 100% chance if you carry this baby, you will die.
It's like, okay, the baby or the mom. That's a tough. You know what it reminds me of? There was a comedian and it was just a bad argument. It was a bad argument. And he's like, you know what no pro-lifer can ever explain to me is that if there was a building on fire and there was a jar with an embryo in it, a fertilized embryo and a 5-year-old in it, nobody would ever go and grab the embryo. They would grab the 5-year-old. And I'm like, but you have to understand, to somebody that's a pro-lifer, there's a life that's still gone. It's like saying there's 2 people in a house, there's a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, who are you going to grab? Like, what's the point? Yeah, like, I don't understand what's your question? That's the dilemma, right? That's the moral dilemma, is that I think I would agree with you, is that there's a point where you have to think about that with great conviction, because that's a tough decision. But it's
like asking somebody to choose between their 2 children.
Exactly.
Or like Sophie's Choice, if you've ever read that book.
I have a hard time picking up that book to read it.
Yeah.
As a mom.
So it's like, one of your children is going to live, one of them is going to die. Which one are we going to shoot in the head right now? And it's an impossible decision. But I like what you said, that there's a recognition, regardless of the choice, a recognition of a loss of life.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I think that that's important, that these decisions are never lightly made. Regardless, I have never personally been confronted by somebody who just has an abortion willy-nilly and is like, I'm going to go have an abortion for fun. I understand that there's that shout your abortion movement. But I think that largely those people know off camera. I don't think they're really proud of what they've done. I think there's a lot of heartache underneath the surface. These are heavy and weighty decisions. Yeah.
And the other thing about it, to kind of think through that line of thinking, because my brain is braining right now, if abortion were just healthcare, then there would be almost none. Like, there would be almost no abortions that ever took place, because the only time you would ever have to consider it for healthcare under that umbrella is if your life were in danger, which is exceedingly rare. So if you need an abortion and you need it to be available because of that, then you're basically fighting for the right of less than 1% of these situations, like 1% or less.
For argument's sake, if I'm actually talking to somebody who's bringing this argument up, I'll ask them about their stuff in healthcare, but that's actually ultimately where I'll probably just land. I'll be like, okay, fine. Case of the life of the mother. Fine. Abortions are completely fine for the case of the life of the mother. Can we talk now about the 99% of abortions? Yeah. So I'll agree to that if you can agree with me that abortions are the killing of an innocent human being, which is murder, and therefore they should be illegal.
And I think it's very, very interesting. And this is something that I'm learning as I'm watching. I'm not even in these debates yet. I'm just watching people make the argument that most of the time they bring up the less than 1%. It's like they don't want to talk about the majority of abortion. I think that is very interesting, because it's almost as if you were to it's like a, what is it called? A red herring. It's almost like they're trying to red herring you. Like, here, let's focus on this. Don't look at this, go look at this. But yeah, we could talk about this for a long time. Days. This could easily be, and there might be, I don't know, maybe at some point a part 2. It would be great to have you back on at some point to talk about really anything, even atheism, because it seems
anytime.
It seems to be a subject of great importance to you, and you have a pretty cool background with it. So, but Jon, is there anything else that you want to? This is a complicated topic, a lot to say on it. Is there anything you want to leave my viewers with about this topic?
Yeah, I don't want to end where we began, kind of, and just express, like, we've talked about a lot. And this issue is emotionally and spiritually charged. And I want to let you know that if you have had an abortion, if you're struggling with that issue, there is help for you.
Yeah.
You're not alone. The devil is gonna lie to you and tell you you're alone. He's gonna tell you that nobody understands what you're going through, which is just clearly false. Statistics show us otherwise. There's so many people who have wrestled as you're wrestling. There's so many people who have gone through abortions and are feeling the same things that you're feeling, and there's forgiveness in Christ. And I would just plead with you to move towards some place where you can get help. And I want to make sure that you know that Melissa and I, we're not condemning you, because there's no condemnation in Christ Jesus. If you are thinking about having an abortion, I would just beg of you to reconsider. Please, it's not the answer, and it's not gonna have the result that you think it's gonna have. There's other consequences that you don't know about, or maybe you're not thinking about right now. And there is help. Find a pregnancy resource center, talk to a parent, a counselor, a friend, a pastor, somebody who can point you to good resources. So, because it is a life.
Thank you, Jon. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's been so cool meeting you,
Oh my
meeting
gosh.
you. So
it's good to meet you.
Yeah. So, but yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Melissa.